The perception, the legacy media is like owned by the Jews.
I was going to say, Ben, come
Israel.
on. You Jews own the media, Ben.
Oh, wow. Oh, shots fired. You see, Charlie Kirk just said something deeply anti-Semitic, so...
A long war is not good for Israel. A long, drawn-out war, and we're coming towards 2 years in about a month, so it's been about 23 months. So what does ultimate success look like in the Gaza Strip?
Now, my main critique of the Netanyahu administration in Israel and the Netanyahu government is they didn't move faster. I think this should have been a much more accelerated process. Israel set out at the beginning.
Genocide must have been quicker. We screwed it up. We didn't deserve them fast enough.
Of this war with two goals as articulated by the Israeli government. Goal number one was to get as many hostages out as humanly possible to free the hostages. And second was to win the war. In many ways, those are mutually exclusive goals, because if you actually wish to win the war, then you have to do things militarily that are going to involve actual movement on the ground. And meanwhile, Hamas is attempting to basically use the hostages as its own form of human shields. They've used their own civilians as human shields. They're also using the hostages.
I'm just trying to get to the point, because they always show this clip of Charlie Kirk being like, is Israel committing ethnic cleansing? And I'm just asking questions here. And then they never show Ben Shapiro's response. So I'm trying to find that part of the clip. What's your initials, Ben? BS?
Situation. Looking at this from an American perspective, things could have been handled differently, maybe on the PR front, maybe also just on a conduct front.
You can tell Charlie Kirk, the way that he's asking these questions, he's moved on. Ben has not.
Would you say, as an outsider, things that could have been handled better, more efficiently, or with more precision?
So number one, there's no such thing as a perfect war. So obviously in any war, there are going to be things that happen that are ugly and that are terrible. And that is why war is...
That's right. Every war has a byproduct.
It's a terrible thing. As far as a sort of operational front, again, I've spent an awful lot of time in Israel. I've watched tape of operations happening, drone operations. I've met with an enormous number of Israeli soldiers, young men and women, people who are 18, 19, 20 years old, who have had legitimately their limbs blown off going house to house in an area where they didn't have to. The charge that Israel has been indiscriminate in its use of force in the Gaza Strip is an absurdity on its face. Israel has complete air superiority over the Gaza Strip. If it wanted to level the place and turn it into a parking lot October 8th, it certainly had the military capacity to do so. It has not done that. Instead, it has sacrificed legitimately 1,000 of its own young men, particularly in these areas, and thousands more who are wounded for the rest of their lives, going house to house in an attempt to prevent all of that, and is currently shipping in 4,400 calories per day per person into the Gaza Strip, much of which is then stolen by Hamas. So that is not to say that any war is perfect. This war has been conducted in about as meticulous way as any urban war in history. Just because war is ugly doesn't mean that it's being fought wrongly. And I think that the main mistake that Israel has made is misunderstanding how public relations works, in the sense that they couldn't have presented this war in a better, kinder way that people would have loved. What they could have done is move faster. And the reality is that the American way of doing war is to win as fast as possible. And we don't like long, drawn-out occupations. We don't like long, drawn-out military operations. That's true in Iraq. It's true in Afghanistan.
We don't like long, drawn-out occupations. Just occupier logic. We just gloss right over the elephant in the room. Yes, we occupy lands, of course, but like, we try to do it in an efficient way, okay? We're on a budget. We like occupations, yes. That's the assumption there, right? That's what he's implying. Occupations are fine, sure. Interventionism, good, yes. But we don't like to draw it out. And this is the same, I learned this from Noam Chomsky when he was covering the Vietnam War. And when he talks about the Vietnam War at the time, the most liberal doves of the intellectual community in the United States that were involved in the political framing of the war never condemned the United States for intervening and starting a war with Vietnam. The harshest critique was always that it was a blunder. Like, we went in there for good reasons, but we didn't prosecute the war in the right way. Anytime you hear that phrase, prosecute the war, you're speaking to an outraged fascist, because they all say that. But yeah, Ben Shapiro's doing the same thing here for Israel, manufacturing consent for their war crimes by saying, look, we have noble, righteous aspirations and motives, but there's no such thing as a perfect war, and we're going to make mistakes. We're going to make some blunders. And yes, I have my own criticisms of how it was prosecuted. Could have been faster, says Ben Shapipi.
Afghanistan, it's true in Ukraine, it's true in the Gaza Strip. And so the kind of things that we Americans like to see are, for example, the operations against Hezbollah that took about 3 weeks to 5 weeks, or the operation against Iran, which took about 12 days, right? Those are operations that any ally of the United States can sustain long operations like the one that Israel has been performing in the Gaza.
Yeah, when you have to actually fight a country that has human rights and a military infrastructure, look at that. You have to go running with your tail between your legs and calling Daddy America for a timeout with Iran because you can't handle the heat. But, yeah, that's a lot different than when you pick on your punching bag, aka the Gaza Strip, which has no infrastructure to begin with, no military.
Strip are inherently very, very difficult from PR level. And I'm not sure, to be frank, that there is a way for Israel to, quote unquote, win the PR war in the middle of a very long war against an intransigent terrorist enemy that legitimately embeds itself in the most damaging places.
A claim I receive often, and we're starting our campus tour tomorrow, is that Israel is committing genocide.
Wow, that was so that was a day before. This was his last interview. He's like, look, I'm starting my campus tour tomorrow. And the next day he gets shot.
How do you respond to that, Ben?
There's literally no definition of genocide by which Israel is committing a genocide. Typically, a genocide involves the targeted killing of the vast majority of the population, or at least an attempt to do so.
That's not what I heard, Benny boy. Now we have the UN formally calling it a genocide.
There has never been a genocide attempted in world history in which the food that was being shipped in was more than the daily caloric intake of the average American into the areas where you're supposedly attempting to genocide the population.
Source? Trust me, bro? Source? Crack pipe? What?
The total population loss in the Gaza Strip thus far has been 3%. During the Holocaust, just to take a reference, it was 50%. During Rwanda, it was significantly higher than 3%. You don't issue leaflet warnings to people. You don't go house to house in a genocide in an attempt to reduce civilian casualties. I understand that people use genocide at this point to just mean thing I don't like. And I get that. I understand. Nobody likes war. Nobody wants war. Certainly not the Israelis who were not at war on October 6th. The fact is that every Israeli family has to send their 18-year-old son or daughter off to the military with the possibility that they're going to get blown up in Gaza.
So he just
typically a genocide involves the targeted killing of the vast majority of the population, or at least an attempt to do so.
Okay, well, we certainly have that in the Gaza Strip. It's being reported that nearly 700,000 have been killed in this genocide, and well over 90% of all the buildings in the Gaza Strip have been destroyed. So that indicates wanton destruction of an entire civilization in whole or in part. Couple that with the intentional rhetoric surrounding the genocide made by Israelis' public officials, who have said in no uncertain terms that we are out to massacre all the Palestinians. There is no distinction between enemy combatants and civilians, which is another war crime, by the way, and a stated intent to bring about the destruction of an entire civilization in whole or in part. Another definition, legal definition, Ben, of genocide, the legal definition is to bring about conditions of life that are so severe, which prove that they were calculated to bring about conditions of genocide, aka forced starvation, famine. Let's go back.
There has never been a genocide attempted in world history in which the food that was being shipped in was more than the daily caloric intake.
I mean, again, that's like not true. And yes, there has been, that's the point though, Ben, because there's plenty of food on the other side of the apartheid wall. It's the fact that Israel is blocking the food being let in. There's plenty of food. There's plenty of food out just along the borders of the Gaza Strip, and you're blocking it. You're blocking that. That's literally humanitarian aid because they've been denied their human rights, and you as a belligerent occupier are denying your responsibilities as a belligerent occupier by not feeding the people and protecting the people, the civilian population, and making sure that their lives are not altered by the conflict as pertaining to the rules of engagement. And yes, I do remember when they poisoned the flour. He deliberately keeps the language vague and passive. Food is just shipped in and whoops, people are starving to death. Right.
Of the average into the areas where you're supposedly attempting to genocide the population. The total population loss in the Gaza Strip thus far has been 3%.
Okay. The total population loss of the Gaza Strip has been 3%. So if we're to believe that 2.3 million people, what's 3% of 2.3 million people? I don't know how to do that. I'm not a math guy, but I just want to know. because like even 2.3 million people times 3% is like still an ungodly amount. So they're saying 69,000 people. He's saying, look, it's just been 70,000 people that have died. We've only killed 70,000 civilians, when we know that actually it's upwards of 700,000 at the bare minimum, not including like the 150,000 that are not even being accounted for because they're under the rubble and so they're not counted. So it's about a cool million, and I say that with the deepest sardonic sarcasm that I can possibly muster. So again, your claims of 3% are from where? Your bunghole? Where the source? The IDF is saying 3% of the Gaza population is. And oh, by the way, that's fine. 70,000 people, completely okay. 70,000 compared to 1,200 that we're made to believe. We know that he's lying, and even if he was telling the truth, it's not an excuse. It's still a war crime. It's still a criminal act, and the genocide doesn't just pertain to the amount of people dying. It also pertains to the destruction of civilian life, like just the destruction of, infrastructure. In order to have a society, you need to have buildings. If you can't have infrastructure, then you don't have a society. So that's another way of depriving. Also, evidence of genocide is the illegal blockade and the siege. You were intentionally starving these people. So, and we also know that the amount of people that have starved to death in the Gaza Strip greatly outweighs the number of people that were outright bombed, which I thought about that early on. And right, they also completely destroyed the record and the record keepers. But he's saying that 3% of the population of 2.3 million people in the Gaza Strip have died. And that's not a genocide. It doesn't quite meet the threshold according to Ben Shapiro, but we know that it's more like 700. So what is, let's call it 700,000 to be generous. 700,000 of 2.3 million. It's not 3%, it's more like 30%. He's like, oh, I forgot to carry that zero over. Oops. It's just 3. Think about this. The fact that there's 2.3 million people in the Gaza Strip already is a humanitarian crisis before October 7th. 2.3 million people lived in an enclave 25 miles long by 5 miles wide. They faced already horrendous living conditions based on the amount of people to the amount of resources available. And that is because of the Israeli occupation of Palestinian lands, turning the Gaza Strip, which was indigenous to 50,000 people before 1948, to then being overwhelmed with 250,000 plus. And from there, it gets worse, obviously. We're in the millions now.
Issue leaflet warnings to people. You don't go house to house in a genocide in an attempt to reduce civilian casualties.
Again, that's a non-point, because think about this. You're announcing to the entire Gaza city, for example, get out of your homes. What he's saying so casually, so callously, brushing off like they're doing the Gazans a favor, is indeed a war crime. You can't, even if you do warn them, having them pick up all of their things, transferring, literally, this is a part of humanitarian law. This is a violation of humanitarian laws. Forcing the occupied people to transfer to another part of the occupied territories or out of the occupied territories for fear of violence, notwithstanding even that, it still is a war crime. That still is, that's considered textbook ethnic cleansing. And he's just saying, look, we did them a favor. We dropped leaflets telling them to leave, then we bomb. And also the other thing is you're not giving them a meaningful amount of time to get out of harm's way. In fact, you're doing it intentionally to sow chaos, telling everyone in the Gaza city to just leave their homes, like with no way, like where are they supposed to go? There's no meaningful way that they can escape. So it's calculated to bring about living conditions that destroy the civilization ultimately, that harm civilian life.
I understand that people use genocide at this point to just mean thing I don't like. And I get that. I understand. Nobody likes war. Nobody wants war.
Oh, so you understand why people use genocide now?
Certainly not the Israelis who are not at war on October 6th. The fact is that
it's like Norman Finkelstein brings up the very Hasbara that Ben Shapiro is bringing up now about we drop leaflets, we send robotexts. This has been going on for decades. Obviously, Norman Finkelstein wrote a book before October 7th debunking this Hasbara talking point. And he makes the analogy of, let's just say you have a building and you put up signs in the building that says, in the event of a fire, use the fire escape. But there is no fire escape. Can you say that you gave the people in that building a viable way to escape the fire? Just because you decided that you could put up signs for something that wasn't there in the first place?
That every Israeli family has to send their 18-year-old son or daughter off to the military with the possibility that they're going to get blown up in Gaza.
Cool. So every civilian is a combatant. Or is that what you're saying, Ben? Every civilian is a combatant in Israel. Got it. So there are no innocent civilians in Israel? Is that what you're just admitting?
It's not something that any Israeli wants, right, left, or center. The real question is whether the accusations are accurate. They certainly are not, again, by any stretch of the imagination.
I have one or two other questions on Israel. I think it's very important for our audience to hear this, though, because there is an incessant campaign. And one thing a friend said to me, interestingly, which is, okay, Charlie, we've pushed back against the media on COVID, on lockdowns.
Here's the clip that everybody plays.
Ukraine,
Finally, we get
on
to
the
it.
border. So like, maybe we should also ask a question. Is the media totally presenting the truth when it comes to Israel? Just a question, that maybe we should
Watch, look how his eyebrows go up. See
I know
that?
I've been conditioned to ask a lot more critical questions over the last couple of
You're
years.
doubting
Ben,
Israel's
some people would
narrative?
accuse Israel of wanting to ethnically cleanse. Some people in the Israeli government are saying, again, it's all over the place, right? You have opinions all over. In your opinion, what would a good outcome 5 years from now be, and how does one respond to the claims of ethnic cleansing?
So ethnic cleansing, the idea, presumably, that population movement is equivalent to ethnic cleansing. I think ethnic cleansing is a term that's been fairly recently coined to describe population movement during war. And the reality is that's been ongoing for literally all of human history. The idea
Yeah, well, you know what? You're right. The Armenian genocide happened, so that's fine. Let's keep going with it. Let's do 2.0. Look, we had the Holocaust already. It already happened. So this has already been going on since history, time immemorial. So yeah, ethnic cleansing is used to describe the process of transferring the civilian population from one part of the occupied territory to another part of the occupied territory, or to outside of the occupied territory. That is considered ethnic cleansing. What a revelation for you to acknowledge that. And yes, it has happened before. That's not a justification for it happening now. Well, slavery existed for all of human history, so the transatlantic slave trade was actually fine, guys. Okay.
that Israel is, quote unquote, forcing people out of the Gaza Strip. That is not the stated policy of the
This is new age terminology.
Israeli government. The idea is if people want to leave, they can, but they're not being forced to leave. Again, moving people out of heavily urbanized areas that are honeycombed with terrorist booby traps pretty much everywhere.
Honeycombed with booby traps made by terrorists. Yeah. I mean, again, source, the IDF. Where are your sources for this? Again, we're talking about occupied people. All bets are off. You're cooked. You're cooked at that point. As soon as we talk about the fact that you're occupying people, end of story. You have no claim. You have no moral right from an illegal wrong. You cannot trace a moral right to self-defense from an illegal act of aggression. I mean, come on. This is basic elementary bull. A 5-year-old can understand.
It's not the same.
It is a softer form of because when you think about it, ethnic cleansing is like, well, you can leave, get out of here. Or coupled with the alternative, which is we're going to K-word you. So yeah, I guess in that sense, it's a softer version of the G word.
Is not true. As far as your earlier question about what we believe from the media, one of the things that I find kind of astonishing in some of the folks on the right who are highly critical of Israel is actually the lack of the lack of skepticism when it comes to legacy media. Legacy media are radically anti-Israel overall. The New York Times.
What? The legacy media is anti-Israel. I feel like anybody that uses legacy media, that's another right-wing dog whistle. Elon Musk says legacy media a lot. Yeah, again, source, trust me, bro. The legacy media is anti-Israel. Are you crazy? Let's hear this brain rot about the New York Times.
Times can certainly not be accused of being a pro-Israel outlet. It'd be very difficult to make the accusation that the Associated Press.
What? Are you kidding me? Dude, I've been making videos for years about the IDF Times, the New York Crimes. They write and pin article after article saying, according to the IDF, according to Israeli officials. I mean, the New York Times runs D for Israel like it's nobody's business.
Who's worked hand in glove with Hamas for years, or Reuters. That these are wildly pro-Israel outlets, and yet when it comes to the reporting, it seems to be sort of the opposite.
Ben,
so the perception, the legacy media is like owned by the Jews.
I was going to say, Ben, come
pro-Israel.
on. You Jews own the media, Ben.
Oh, wow. Oh, shots fired. When he lies, his eyebrows grow larger. Sure. You see, Charlie Kirk is just said something deeply anti-Semitic, according to Ben Shapiro. So I'd be, if it was anybody else, I'm sure Ben Shapiro would accuse him of anti-Semitism. Saying that the Jews own the media, that's an anti-Semitic trope.
So, I mean, come on. As you can tell by all the wonderful headlines you guys get.
Oh, he didn't like that. So you gave a little head nod, a head shake. Oops.
Well, I mean, dude, the accusation that we own the media has not prevented, the Daily Wire from employing people who radically disagree with me on all of these matters. I mean, I don't agree with Matt Walsh.
Ooh, wow. Dude, and then 24 hours later, he's toast.
On foreign policy. Matt obviously is a major host over at Daily Wire, and that's just my shop. And I'm overtly pro-Israel. Right? I mean, I'm not making any bones about this. I'm a Jew and I'm a Zionist. I'm not going to pretend that.
Uh-oh. Charlie Kirk, now Ben Shapiro is on the ropes. He feels attacked.
Otherwise would be absolutely silly to suggest that some sort of atheistic Jewish person by birth who does not care about Judaism or Israel owning the New York Times means the New York Times is pro-Israel is to ignore literally every bit of coverage they have ever done for my entire lifetime.
What?
Just my shop, and I'm overtly pro-Israel. Right? I mean, I'm not making any bones about this. I'm a Jew and I'm a Zionist. I'm not going to pretend that to say otherwise would be absolutely silly. To suggest that some sort of atheistic Jewish person by birth who does not...
An atheistic Jewish person by birth. What the did I just hear? I mean, that's just, those are words, Ben. Ben definitely speaks words. Atheistic Jewish person by birth, guys.
I care about Judaism or Israel owning the New York Times means the New York Times is pro-Israel is to ignore literally every bit of coverage they have ever done.
What did he say at the end? I never...
That some sort of atheistic Jewish person by birth who does not care about Judaism or Israel owning the New York Times means the New York Times is pro-Israel is to ignore literally every bit of coverage they have ever done for my...
Is to ignore, he says, is to ignore all of the coverage. He's like, even if some atheistic Jewish person by birth owns the New York Times, claiming that means that they care about Israel or the Jews, is to ignore all of the coverage since Ben has been in this world of the New York Times covering Israel when, I mean, hello, the New York Times is obscenely pro-Zionist, obscenely pro-Israel. I think that the New York Times is complicit in manufacturing consent, not even just complicit, but actively manufacturing consent for this genocide. And they have been for many years.
My entire lifetime.
We're running out of time here.
Yeah, we're running out of time now. He just said, come on, guys. Come on, you Jews own the media. Okay, well, shots fired. All right, we're running out of time.
But just
let's plug the book now.
Last question on this, Ben. I know this might be a tougher question, but Bibi said, quote, I didn't like how he said this, I'll be honest. You can't be MAGA if you're anti-Israel. I don't like it for a couple reasons. How did you analyze that statement from Bibi?
I mean, I think that there is the ungenerous way of interpreting that and then the generous way of interpreting that. So the ungenerous way is to suggest that you have to hold a particular position on every Israeli governmental activity in order to be MAGA, which of course is not true. I mean, you can disagree from the right or from the left with Bibi's policies, and you can still be plenty MAGA. I think the idea that Bibi is putting out there is that if you are taking Hamas's side against Israel...
Did he just say you can criticize from the left and still be MAGA? So there's the MAGA left? Is that right?
In a conflict. It is very difficult to align that with the stated positions of the Trump administration or what President Trump himself is doing right now. I certainly is true.
You cannot, look, I think you can have disagreements on Israel and still be MAGA, obviously. You should be America first. But if you're pro-Hamas, you're something darker. And we shouldn't put up with that. Ben, tell us about your important new book.
So the basic idea...
The finger wag, Hamas. No. I don't want to hear about Ben's book, do you? Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe to the page to help it grow. And if you'd like to support my work, join my Patreon for exclusive content.